Over 16 years ago, a man walked up to his bosses and gave an insane proposal.
Remember those two Dreamcast games that we invested so much money in that, when they and the console flopped, we ended up going third party?
Yeah.
What if we give that a second try?
But we already did a guy that drives a forklift. What else can we do with it?
Organized crime.
Oh, okay, so shootouts and robberies? Well, wouldn't we be seen as ripping off GTA 3 though?
But what if we make him a Yakuza who doesn't commit crimes?
If this flops, you're fired.
And thus the Yakuza franchise was born!
The Yakuza games are a series of beat-em-ups, or in the case of the direction they'll be going now, turn-based RPGs about various criminal conspiracies relating to the Yakuza. Most, if not all of them, offer flashy combat, engaging stories, and a ton of stuff to do. Like, I spent 10 hours straight managing a cabaret club levels of stuff to do.
But we can save that part for later, Kirby-chan! Needless to say, the both of us are fans of the Yakuza game series, and today we want to talk about the game that started off the Kiryu saga, Yakuza 0.
As a prequel to the series, we'd both say that Yakuza 0 is the best starting point for any newcomers, and a lot agree seeing as how the game is by far one of the best-selling Yakuza games in the West, and even led to Sega of America ordering reprints of the first 4 Yakuza games. Yakuza 0 caused a huge amount of newcomers to enter the franchise.
Both of us included. However, the purpose of this video is not to give our backstories on entering the series, it's to review this game. And maybe the other ones, we'll see. I'm totally not being roped in here against my will.
Hey, when I drunk called you about the idea, you didn't remotely disagree with it.
Wait a minute, you were drunk?
Yakuza is seen as a spiritual successor to the Shenmue games, a beat-em-up with RPG elements where you explore a semi-open world that offers a ton of distractions.
Which again, we'll get to that. And even then, that spiritual successor portion may or may not be accurate, depending on who you ask. Especially if it's from the Shenmue community. They get more antsy than the backers of Shenmue 3.
To say. Anyway, Yakuza 0's combat is relatively simple, yet incredibly fun. In Yakuza 0, you switch between 2 characters, series protagonist Kazuma Kiryu and his soon-to-be rival, Goro Majima. Each of them have 3 different fighting styles to switch between. Well, technically 4, but we'll get to that.
For Kiryu, he has access to Brawler, which is basically a balance between speed and power, Rush, which highly emphasizes speed and is very effective when racking up combos, and Beast Style, which focuses mainly on power at the cost of speed, like a certain DBZ transformation I hate. And like that transformation, Beast is not that great to use in comparison because of how fast the enemies are in this game, and how you're more likely to miss your attacks in this mode than the other modes. But I digress, and we'll save the Force Style for later. And then, we have Majima's styles, which are mostly similar to Kiryu's, except instead of relying on fists, he relies on weapons and his feet. Thug style is basically Kiryu's brawler style with a higher emphasis on mobility, Slugger is basically hitting opponents with a bat until they get struck out on the floor, and Breaker is basically Rush, but with a lot of dancing thrown in. Also, something Force style, we'll get to that later as well. All of these are very diverse and very unique, and are incredibly useful, save for Beast, but again I digress, in a game that has a very fluent and effective fighting system. It feels so satisfying when you land a punch on the enemies, or hit them with an object you can grab in the fighting area, helped further by the great sound effects adding some much needed crunch to the hit. It's great.
And you know what makes the combat even more satisfying? The heat moves. After filling a gauge, Kiryu and Majima are able to perform a variety of special attacks on enemies, and there are a lot of options for these heat moves. Carrying a bicycle wheel? Slam it on their head. Near a wall? Have them damage their own foot before breaking their leg. Carrying an enemy in beast mode? Use him as a human weapon against other enemies. Simply behind one of them in thug style? Snap their neck. By the way, these guys definitely do not kill. As you probably picked up by now, you don't only have to fight with your fists. Littered around the streets are weapons you can grab and use. You can also take weapons from knocked out enemies or buy weapons for yourself, but don't rely on them too much since they have a durability meter.
But thankfully, if a weapon does run out of usage, rather than you losing it forever, you can easily get it repaired. In addition, you can also get equipment and armor that can slightly boost your stats or grant secondary effects.
There's a surprising amount of variety in the weapons, and almost all of them are fun to use, but odds are you'll be primarily using the fighting styles. Each of these 6 fighting styles can be leveled up further through 2 different ways, training with the various different masters who taught you the fighting styles, or the most common way, money. See, this game takes place during 1988, the bubble period for Japan's economy. This gets reflected in the gameplay by how every enemy is loaded. Seriously, you can get your ass handed to you throughout half the fight against low-level thugs and still get hundreds of thousands of yen after winning. And through the money you get, you can invest it in Kiryu and Majima's bodies, not my words, to make them stronger. I absolutely love this exaggerated way to blend in the world with the gameplay. The enemies being absolutely rich, being as a result of the economy, adds so much personality to the simple method of beat up bad guys get money.
But of course, that's not the only way to get money, because during the course of the game, you can also get involved in a shakedown! That's right, the big daddy, or daddies as there are 4 of them, of the enemies you fight in this game outside of bosses. They get harder the more you fight him, and they can be a giant pain to fight, but they are loaded with so much more cash that it's worth fighting for if you're strong enough. But they can also steal all your money if you lose, so it's a fair trade, and honestly, despite the frustration, it was fun beating up these guys because of the high-risk, high-reward system they bring to the game.
However, what if fighting Mr. Shakedown isn't your preferred way to get rich? What if you feel like you don't want to risk losing all your money against a tough boss? Heck, what if you just want a bit of a break from combat in general? Well, let me tell you this, you are in a lot of luck.
Like my partner stated, this game doesn't just have combat going for it. You can also dick around the towns of Kamurocho and Sotenbori, doing various minigames, do a bunch of side quests, or make a lot of money through Kiryu running a real estate business, or Majima running a cabaret. But we're only going to cover these one at a time because of the insane depth and intrigue both these modes left on us.
Let's start by talking about the minigames. I always love it when games offer up in-universe means of entertainment to do as both a player and character. It's a great way to liven up the world and make it feel alive. From the extravagant cinematics offered up in the karaoke minigames, to the various gambling hangouts to gain points which can be exchanged for prizes, to building your own toy car and racing it against others. You can even go to the arcades and play actual old Sega games such as Outrun and Space Harrier. There's literally dozens of possible options to choose from.
In fact, a lot of these minigames have their own sub-stories that not only are interesting in terms of story and depth, but also help you later on during the business portions as recruitable members depending on the person, and depending on if your friendship gauge is high enough, which increases by interacting with the person and helping them out. Plus, doing all the side quests leads to a super boss for both characters that is a giant pain. But all in all, the side quests are really good. Some of my favorites including the Pocket Circuit side stories, and this fun little side story with a fortune teller that may or may not spoil future games.
Another cool thing about the sub-stories is how, unless you have the encounter tracker, you'll never know when it's coming up. Some might view it as frustrating to not know where you need to go to start a side quest, which is understandable, but personally, I love this method. It really puts you in the shoes of the protagonist, where you're just walking around the streets or killing your boredom before, BOOM! A kid has been stealing people's pants and you need to stop it. You're making a music video with Steven Spielberg and Michael Jackson. You accidentally promised to buy a porno magazine for a kid, and you have to find a way to buy it without anybody seeing you. A standout memory is when I, as Kiryu, decided to try out the disco minigame a few times on a whim. Then it led to 2 different people viewing me as a rival and challenging me to dance-offs, and after I beat both of them, I had to humble a dancing legend from another city, leading him to gain a newfound respect for both Kiryu and dancers as a whole. See what I mean? Not only is there so much variety to the objectives of these sub-stories, but you'll never expect what's happening. From the heartwarming to the hilarious, almost all the sub-stories are worth your time. Also, the fact that some of the sub-stories involve younger versions of characters who play a bigger role in other Yakuza games is a great touch.
And then, of course, there's the business side stories for Kiryu and Majima's campaigns. So many people have talked about it, and we're contributing to it, and I don't care. These are great, they're fun, and they suck so many hours out of me trying to max them all out, whether it be the models or the districts owned by the 5 kings, plus doing their stories to completion also unlocks the 4th and final style for both characters, which is basically a fuck you style to your enemies. The Legend style, also known as Dragon of Dojima, and Mad Dog of Shimano style for Kiryu and Majima respectively. They're great to control, combo your enemies with. It is fucking great.
I second that. I love the business side stories, not just for being easy ways to get billions of yen, though that certainly doesn't hurt, but due to how much went into making them feel real. Kiryu and Majima both find themselves involved with helping failing businesses and dealing with the criminal conspiracies involving them. Both of these side stories offer their own supporting cast, their own rogues gallery, even their own sub-stories involving the businesses. That's right, we've got side quests within side quests. The business side stories themselves play pretty well too. The real estate side story is relatively simple, where you buy property and invest money to increase its value. But the kings of the various districts, the 5 billionaires, will frequently try to get in your way, either through bidding wars for the properties, sending goons to attack your turf, and even wagering sales against you in minigames. The 5 billionaires all have distinct personalities, and there's a neat twist once you defeat the 5th one. As for the Cabaret Club, good god, this could be the main game and I'd still be satisfied. Matching customers to the hostess that best suits their preferences while making sure you don't overstress your workers, along with knowing when to use Fever Time, basically the minigame's super move, adds a fun layer of strategy. But the Platinum hostesses are definitely the highlight. Each of these girls have their own personalities, their own insecurities, their own individual sub-stories once you finish training them. It makes the special training segments for them a lot of fun, since you're doing more than just improving their stats. You're learning more about them as people. It also helps that some of the villains in the side story, such as Kizuka and Mizumura, are equally complex and interesting. It was a blast going through the Cabaret Club side story.
But speaking of stories, what do we think of the main one? Is it worth exploring both cities and doing all the side quests for? Well, let's get into it.
Now, we'll try not to give too many spoilers in this section, but just in case you want to know as little about the story as possible, here's where you can go to skip to our final thoughts. We'll also give some additional warnings for certain individual story moments as well. With that being said, hot damn is this story amazing to go through. As mentioned earlier, you play as both Kiryu and Majima in this game, rotating between them every 2 chapters. In Kiryu's story, he finds himself framed for murder, and the lieutenants of his family seem to know quite more about it than they're letting on. As it turns out, it's part of a scheme in order to secure an empty plot of land for the patriarch of the family, Dojima, so that the lieutenant who gets it for him will be promoted to captain. So Kiryu sets off to unravel the truth behind the murder, all while having a target painted on him by the very crime family he's a part of.
As for Majima, his story revolves around him being assigned to deal with the owner of the aforementioned empty lot, but as it turns out, the owner is a blind young woman named Makoto. So his issue then becomes one of either saving Makoto or killing her to get back into the family he was once exiled from due to a certain incident in the past. While neither Kiryu or Majima interact with one another until the very end of the game, even then the canonicity of that is debatable, both their stories were very interesting on their own, and in terms of a combined story, it also holds up really well.
Along with that, the villains in this game are a ton of fun, except for Laogui. Each has their own ideology about what it means to be a Yakuza, and despite most of them technically having the same goal, do a great job at standing out from each other. The hedonistic Awano, the prideful, revenge-driven Kuze, the quiet and methodical Shibusawa, and the off-the-walls, batshit crazy Nishitani. The dude literally calls the police and outs himself as a mugger just to give Majima an excuse to fight him. He's my favorite. There's also Dojima and Shimano, the bosses of Kiryu and Majima respectively, who are both way more intimidating and charismatic here than they were in their debut appearance. Seeing the villains all try to outmaneuver one another and pull off their own different schemes in order to obtain the empty lot was a ton of fun, and it really sells you on the idea that the protagonists are tangled in a situation far bigger than they realize. And without giving too much away, the morally ambiguous allies for both Kiryu and Majima definitely do great jobs at bringing intensity whenever they're involved.
Sure, some may see moments of their characters, in fact a lot of these characters, as over the top and silly. But Yakuza 0 can be many moods, and all are done really well. When it does laughs, it's done well, such as the dominatrix side story. When it wants tears, it can absolutely deliver them. Such as, spoilers, Nishiki holding a gun to Kiryu's head and the two going their separate ways. When it wants drama, it also does this well, especially in regards to the structure of the chapters. Sometimes ending with a huge cliffhanger, making us want to start the next chapter to see where things go next, which happened a lot during the game, especially during Majima's route. And frankly, I think this is the best game to start the series with probably, because of these multiple tones, because it's common in the series, and your enjoyment or distaste for it can ultimately decide if you want to continue playing through the series, or stop there. Overall, Yakuza 0 was a lot of fun. The game has a ton to do, and so much of that stuff is incredibly fun. The story is very engaging and fun to go through. The combat is fluent, fast, and fun. The music, oh my god, that's right, we forgot about that. The music is so fantastic to listen to. Sure, you can listen to it on its own, but it sounds way better when it's played in the game or during specific moods. It's a soundtrack that works for both, and that's fantastic. In fact, this entire game is great, and as an added bonus, it's incredibly easy to find and purchase since the game goes on sale all the time. But don't let that low price tag fool you. The contents of this game is worth way more than that price tag. I easily clocked in a good 70 hours in the game, and that was because of how much fun I was having with it.
Along with it being a great game on its own, it embodies what to expect from a Yakuza game flawlessly. From how well it juggles different tones, to the flashy action, to how well packed its world is. It also does a solid job setting up the pieces for Yakuza 1 without outright spoiling what it'll be about for newcomers, making it a great starting point. Only possible negatives there is to starting with 0 is that you're arguably starting at the peak of the games quality-wise.
So basically, after this point, it's all downhill from here.
The other Yakuza games are still a great time, and like we said, who knows, maybe we'll be back again soon talking about them. Maybe I need to get drunk again. That'll help me decide.